Hi, everybody. So, you may know the beautiful, charismatic woman sitting next to me. Her name is Elle.
Hi,
Uh,
I'm Elle.
and yes, this is Elle. She's great. And my name is Maia Poet. This is my channel, as it turns out. You might have seen me in some interviews talking about how I lived as a man undercover, essentially, in Israel, both within Palestinian religious Muslim communities and within ultra Orthodox Jewish communities. But I was actually planning on, you know, living my entire life as a man until one day, um, I think in 2021, when I saw your video titled "I Detransitioned," I think
Why I transitioned and detransitioned
something like that. Yeah,
was my first video.
right. I saw that video. Actually, I just experienced my first war in Israel, which made me basically disillusioned with the left when I realized that they are full proponents of Israelis living under rocket fire from a terrorist group that wants to obliterate Israel and kill as many Palestinians as it can in the process. That terrorist group being Hamas. So I started to question, the left and all of the ideological, components that those opinions are comprised of. And I had just come, in the rabbit hole since I'd started to basically try to prove to my leftist American friends who were tweeting up a storm from their comfortable couches in California while I was living under rocket fire. I was trying to, use my argumentation skills to basically show them that this terrorist group that they are supporting is so anti all of the values that they purport to stand for. And that had got me via the algorithms down into the gender rabbit hole and made me question transitioning in general, which had been my plan for ever since I was 12 in 2012. And while I was in the rabbit hole, I came across your video, and you really placed, I'd say, the first seed of doubt that somebody could regret transition. You placed that first seed of doubt
Right in there.
right in there. Yeah, you placed the first seed of doubt, and I'll
And then I
be
watered it.
yeah, and so I'll be forever grateful. Oh God. So, oh my god. Now I gotta scrunch that up for the sake of the curls. I'll just thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I'll be
How long did it take to grow?
years, years.
That sounds right.
Yeah, like I at first I saw your video and it made me realize that actually somebody can regret transition. But I saw your
It's me.
video and I thought, well, like she's so girly, like she's not like me. I'll never
Yeah.
regret it. I'm the truest of the true transsexuals. So
Not the first time I've heard that either.
I know, I bet. But thankfully, I let that seed grow. And had it not been for seeing your video, when I saw it, while I was starting to question the left and all of its ideological components, I don't think I would have ever desisted. In fact, I'd probably have a full beard by now.
Wow.
So, yeah,
Wow.
I'm like forever indebted to you, L. Palmer, for just the for speaking out. Like, yeah, had it not been for you, I don't know what would have come of me. So
That's crazy. It's really. I mean, I'm really, really glad that I can help you with that.
having you on my channel as my first actual interview on my channel, uh, is a real. It feels like really closing a circle,
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that we ended up being in the same geographical area. I mean, the
Me
maybe
too.
the biggest benefit. Well, I'm going to rephrase that. The biggest silver lining of having escaped terrorists on October 7th and having survived and having temporarily relocated to the United States is that we're within the same geographical region and that I've gotten to meet you.
Wow. That's that's really nice. I'm honestly, it's crazy because you're also the first collab that I've ever had on my channel as well. So we did another video on my channel. This is kind of the after hours version of the first video we made. We just went out with Benjamin Boyce and company his wife and some other people that they know, and got a little tipsy, and now we're here. But we're completely 100%
Sober.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We don't do anything. We don't do drugs.
Yeah.
Or alcohol or anything.
Right. Ever. Yeah.
I've never have in my life.
Yeah. Neither have I. We just got high on life, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyways, so yeah, it's kind of crazy because the reason why we even are talking here at all is because I was interested in Israel versus Palestine and why it was happening and what the big deal was. And I was doing a lot of, it's like the Drake versus Kendrick like rap battle that's going on right now. That was like my fixation was, why are these two countries having their rap battle? You know? That was kind of why.
Right.
That's kind of how I was looking at it.
Why are these cousins killing each other?
Yeah, exactly. No, seriously, like I spent hours on Wikipedia doing like a deep dive, like trying to figure out for myself like what my opinions on it should be, and I was just left more confused after this like hours long deep dive, and I was tweeting about it, and I had no idea what. Like I just felt so stupid and like uneducated, and I was just like, I give up. And so I was tweeting about it, and somebody, I don't even remember who it was, shout out to whoever it was, mentioned that you had just done an interview talking about living in Israel, and you were talking to Carol Sour Patch is something on Twitter. And you were doing an interview with her, and I was like, wait, a detransitioner who also knows about like Israel? That's so cool. So like I don't even know what compelled me, because I literally up until that point had never wanted to get involved in the Israel versus Palestine thing, because I was like, I have no opinions. I don't know what's right. I don't know what's wrong. I don't want to be against Palestine just because all of the left like loves Palestine, but I also don't want to be like, you know, just like following the crowd. So I was like, okay, I really need to know, either to figure it out myself or to like have somebody explain it to me. So yeah, anyway, long story short, I ended up watching the interview that you did where I just thought that you were so incredibly well-spoken and intelligent, and very nice bow tie. The bow tie is really what won me over, and the hair. So I wasn't even listening to what you were saying. I was just watching your mouth move, and I was like, oh man, I need to talk to this girl and get her on my YouTube channel and make her, put her on camera, make her smile. So I messaged. So I sent you a DM after I watched the interview, and turns out you'd already DM'd me. And so it was crazy because we like both wanted to get in touch with the other, and so when we finally did, then we both realized that we lived in Washington, and we got together. And that's how we are sitting where we are. Actually, we're sitting where we are because of Chloe Cole. That's a whole other story.
Oh,
you
yeah.
can tell that story.
Right, yeah. Like, Chloe decided to visit Portland and to visit me, because we'd become friends doing, we'd met at a conference, and then I spent all night talking to her about Shabbat toilet paper.
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me that after you finish this story.
Yeah, sure, yeah. You'll have to remind me.
Okay,
because,
I will.
And yeah, so we had met a few times. My first sort of public speaking engagement about this topic was in Sacramento during Detrans Awareness Day. And so we got to spend a lot of time together with Chloe and some other detransitioners. And yeah, and my friend Laura Becker, shout out to her. she really invited me to this speaking engagement. Really at the last minute, she said, "Can you get on a plane today?" And I said, "Why not?"
Dang, that's so cool.
And I didn't even realize that I was going to speak at this event, really until the car ride there when I wrote the speech that I gave. And yeah, and I basically just talked about sort of the factors that drive trans identification within young women who are lesbians and who are neurodivergent, and just discussed sort of, I gave a little rundown, some tips for parents, just the most basic stuff I could conjure up that I could write on a super short car ride to the event that I was going to be speaking at. I'm kind of a last minute person in that regard. It just, the peer pressure got to me, and I realized, like, I don't really have a fear of public speaking, so, you know, what am I waiting for? And I had my trusty bow tie with me. Yeah, that's all I need.
You come with the hair, and then you just add the bow tie, and then it's all good.
And a nice vest, you just get it.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Yeah, look at that. Snaz. I already changed into my pajamas, and you're still wearing your nice clothes.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
You look so nice that you don't need a vest or a bow tie to look good. You just you got this hair.
Stop.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then Chloe came to visit me, and then out of the blue, just like somebody brought up Seattle, and I was like, yeah, wait, and then I put two and two together, and then I texted Elle. I was like, hey, you want to meet up with us? And so we met up with her. And I'd been wanting to meet Elle for, like, well, really forever, but more specifically, I texted her, a few months before, and then when we'd started talking, it had been a month, and I was just really itching to meet you.
Yeah.
I was like, I have to make this happen, but then I got so busy with other things.
We were both really busy.
We're both just so busy, but finally, just out of the blue, you just agreed to this impromptu meeting, and now we're here, and you're the first guest on my channel.
Yep.
So.
And you on mine.
Yeah. Wow. Crazy how that worked out, isn't it?
It is.
So what do you want to talk about?
I think we should talk about my parents.
All right.
And this is actually something that a lot of people have been asking me to talk about for a long time as well. Because I have not ever really gotten into that much detail about my parents, like my childhood, that much. Because, I mean, part of it is because I wanted to make a video, perhaps, with my parents one day, which I haven't yet, but I'm sure that will happen eventually at some point, to get, like, their perspective on things. But also just, like, I never wanted to blame my parents, for as much as they don't deserve as much of the blame as people like to give parents a lot of the time, I think, I don't know. It's tough because, I mean, I could go into it or you could, like, ask me stuff. It's just, I think you should ask me first. And then we'll keep talking.
All right. Yeah, I have questions because we've been talking a little bit off camera.
Yeah.
I mean, we just got to know each other yesterday.
Yeah, we met for the first time yesterday.
I know, and now we're like fast friends.
Yeah,
we're
crazy. Like instant besties.
I know. Isn't it crazy how that happens?
Yeah, it feels like we've known each other forever.
I know. It really does. And I don't know, maybe it's just because you have a very, like, endearing personality, but I think we also have, like, a lot in common in a really odd and unexpected way.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not just, well, that's crazy. I mean, whenever detransitioners, before I ask you about your parents, I want to talk about this a little bit.
Yes.
A little light note,
yes.
Before we delve into the bitter wine, right? I should have the wine glass, just
grab your water. It's kind of fancy.
Can I turn it into wine?
Yeah.
Isn't that what Jesus did?
Can you? Yeah.
Would that make me like a bad Jew? Probably would make me a bad Jew.
A bad Jew. Wow, that's what Jesus did. He was a Jew.
He was a Jew. Yeah, he sort of split the Jewish community because he said that he was like the son of God. So he did that, and then some people went along with him, and then some people didn't. And then it became a whole new religion, which is crazy how that works. It's crazy how, like, one person can start a new religion. I wonder who started
one dude, Jesus.
I wonder who started the trans religion.
What a crazy dude.
Who do you think started the trans religion? I think there were a lot of key players.
Christine Jorgensen? Isn't that his name?
I mean, yeah, you could trace it back to him, I guess, but he was not a religious figure. It just seemed that his presence caused a lot of other men.
Yeah, but he's like the Messiah. He's the like representation of what everyone wanted. He was like the ideal.
Well, maybe not everyone wanted, but what a certain subsection of men wanted, including gay men and fetishistic cross-dressers.
No, but like he was like the standard. You know what I'm saying? Like the symbol.
Yeah. He was a symbol.
Not like, oh yeah, I want to be this exactly, but like the symbol of like good. This is what we want.
Actually, I think that's actually a very prudent observation, because it is very possible that would have been him. That he would have been the one that sort of symbolized and epitomized the movement that was just brewing, just in its infancy around that time. Yeah.
Just the beginning, like, this is possible. Look at me.
All right. So, Elle, I guess I'm curious to know a bit about sort of how you got into trans, and maybe how you told your parents about it, what words you would have used to describe that, and sort of how did that conversation play out?
Yeah, so I don't even know if I've really talked about this part of it that much, because it seems like people get kind of surprised when I say this, but when I first came out to my parents, they were not affirming immediately, like right off the bat. So they like were like, so I came out to my mom, and I never actually ever came out to my dad. My mom told my dad because I didn't talk directly to my dad, because my dad was an alcoholic for most of my life. And I also haven't ever really talked about this very much, because he was still an alcoholic when I started my YouTube channel, but he's actually been sober for 3 years now, which is crazy, because he was drinking my whole life for as long as I can remember, up until 3 years ago when he went to rehab. So yeah, that's like we didn't have a relationship back then. Like when I came out as trans, he was in like a really bad state for sure, like around that time when I was like 15. I think that he had probably been to rehab recently at that point when I had come out as trans. But it was like one of the times where he went and like immediately started drinking again, or like was sober for like 6 months and then started drinking again. So that there was a few like rough periods in my teenage years where like I wanted to have a relationship with my dad, but I had the requirement that he be sober for it. So when there was a few times where he told us that he was trying to get sober, and then he would get sober for a period of time, and then wouldn't tell us when he would like relapse. And so he would like come home drunk again, or he would like be out all night and we wouldn't know where he was, stuff like that.
Wow.
So it would be like, obviously he had relapsed, but he just would never talk about it. So that was like a big part of my like growing up, was having to deal with that, and like the unpredictability of that, and that definitely like fucked me up a lot as a kid. It's definitely a big part of the reasons like why I am the way that I am now. But yeah, so during the time like when I told my mom that I was trans, I think the way that I had gone about it was just, I know that I had come out as non-binary to my friends when I was 14, and I think there was like maybe like a 6-month period between me coming out as non-binary and then me like identifying as a trans boy. So I don't remember if I had told my parents or my mom that I was non-binary.
So non-binary came first and then trans.
Yeah. because
That's a classic pipeline.
I know, yeah, because I had friends who were doing like the neopronouns, like the z, they, them, and I had one friend actually who changed her pronouns like once a week. She was doing the neopronoun thing. Yeah. And
that's crazy.
She was like, I'm non-binary, but then she started to get into like, I'm a demi-girl or a demi-boy, or I'm like a fucking like xenogenders. I don't fucking know. Like all of those, the Tumblr genders, that's what I would call them. Because when I was 14, I found a Tumblr post that had like a list of like 100 genders. And I remember I read through them all, and I was like, okay, it's alphabetical. Agender, arrowgender, ace gender, you know, and it was like all the things. So, yeah, I remember trying to pick my favorite gender, the one that fit me the best. Back
and did
then.
they give you detailed descriptions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they would like, I know for sure, like, there was one post that was just like a list, and then I would look it up separate, but then there was one that had like literally detailed descriptions after every single one. The one I remember writing like journal entries, and I was like, I would read about a gender, and I would like write down my thoughts about it to try to figure out if that's what fit me. So at one point I was non-binary, and then I went by they, them, or she, they. And then I think after that I went to demi-girl for a little bit, and then after that I went to demi-boy for a little bit, I think. And I think I changed my pronouns to he, they, or maybe... Yeah, I think I changed my pronouns to he, they, and then they, or they, maybe I went she, they, and then they, them, and then he, they, and then eventually I decided, after I was like, actually this 100 genders bullshit is stupid, and then I was like, I'm just a boy, like, that's it. That's what makes the most sense. So I was like a little bit of like a true tran there at the after I went through the 100 genders bullshit. But because I was like, you know, this is all made up actually, and then I was like, actually I'm just a boy. Yeah. So I was like this close, but then
so close, but yet so far.
I could have turned back, but I didn't.
So far. But you were a kid.
Yeah.
Nobody can blame you.
No, I can't blame myself either. Yeah, so that was when I was 15, and so then when I like finally landed on that I was like a trans boy, I remember I got really, really excited. I was like very, very, very excited.
Yeah?
Like a kid on Christmas morning.
And what, now thinking back on it now as a more mature individual, what do you think about it back then was so alluring or so exciting to you? Like that realization, did you feel it, well, first, did you feel it with non-binary? This excitement.
No, the excitement wasn't the same.
Interesting.
With non-binary.
And so with trans, with boy, or with trans boy, what do you think about it made you so excited in a way that non-binary hadn't or couldn't?
Non-binary was more of like an escape, but the trans, like boy was what was so exciting. Like boy, like, oh, this is like a new thing. This is new. This is like, it was like I wasn't me anymore. It was like I was someone else.
Oh.
Yeah.
I get that. So non-binary just felt like a little game. It didn't feel like radical enough or drastic enough.
Me under like a blanket, but boy was like literally just I'm a different person.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is striking because it showcases the extent to which, I mean, we know that adolescence is a time of identity exploration, and you know, without a certain sense of rootedness with a cultural identity, or just a super strong family. Like your family sounded like it was, in shambles.
Yeah.
So clearly you were looking, the way I assess the situation, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I assess the situation is that you were looking for, one, stability, and this identity, in this turbulent time of adolescence and dealing with the home life issues with alcoholism in the family. Like, I would imagine that this gave you a certain sense of stability and possibly even a certain way out, a way to escape.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. The way that, like, I don't often, like, associate my transness with, like, the issues that I had at home or, like, with my parents, but it absolutely went hand in hand, because as soon as I left for college, I was a week out of moving out of my parents' house for the first time, and that's when I detransitioned.
Wow.
As soon as I got out of my parents' house, away from my parents, away from my alcoholic dad, I detransitioned.
Oh my God, that's wow. That's really powerful to think about, because the way I listen to you tell your story, it's like the polar opposite of my story. Like, for me, so I got into the trans identity, for those who don't know, when I was 12 in 2012. And I was struggling with crushes, but I didn't really know what crushes were. I thought that crush was an orange soda that was really trendy with my peer group.
How many times are you going to say that?
I'm just, for the people who don't know, anything about me and have just stumbled across my channel, I think it's sort of important to give a little rundown.
Okay.
So, and I'm going to say it to contrast it with your story as well.
You have some eyelashes. Can I get them off?
Yeah.
You have two.
Should I make a wish?
Yeah.
Should I say my wish?
No, don't say it out loud.
Okay.
Okay, you got them both.
Okay. Thanks for derailing this.
I'm sorry. I'm terrible. I'm sorry. This is after hours, though. It's fine. We're not professional.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. So, I basically was really confused about a lot of things, including about the fact that I was starting to develop attraction to girls. And so I just realized that hanging around girls made me feel uncomfortable, because I was so flustered that I couldn't get a sentence out. So I started hanging out with boys, and we basically formed a strategic alliance through which to prank the teacher incessantly and in the most obnoxious possible way. I mean, she would turn around and we would make whale noises. Like, we would do...
Oh my God, that's horrible.
No, but she wasn't overweight. We just didn't...
Oh, it was just...
No.
Like, random.
It was just random.
I thought you were being mean.
No. We were just being annoying.
Oh, okay.
We were just
that's not as bad.
We were just being annoying little jerks,
okay, that's funny.
But it would always make the girls laugh. Mm-hmm. And that's what we were all after, me and these male classmates. Me and the boys, yeah. We were just after the attention and the affections of the girls. Because whenever we'd prank somebody, they would laugh. And I just, so that was the goal. But none of us really knew what we were doing. We just all kind of engaged in that. And I'd been really distressed about all these crush symptoms that I was feeling that I didn't, before I knew it was a crush, I just thought it was, like, I typed the symptoms into WebMD as one does, and I found at least like 3 neurodegenerative conditions that matched the symptom profile. So I was scared shitless that I was dying. And no matter how many times I've told this story to Elle, she seems to just laugh every single time. It must be so funny.
I heard it in the first interview I saw of you too, and I thought it was so funny.
But I thought you were just watching my lips move and not
No, I
not
wasn't
paying attention.
listening.
You weren't listening.
No, I was just listening.
Oh, you were just listening.
No.
Okay. So the way I got into trans was essentially by... When I was hanging out with these boys, I was at the same time obsessed with the Ellen DeGeneres show. I thought she was super dapper. I thought she was super great. I wanted to, I'd seen her as a woman wearing like vests and blazers, and I just thought, she is so stylish. Like, she wasn't wearing one of those like feminized power suits or whatever. She was wearing like dapper, more like menswear. And around that time, I was 12. That's around the age when a lot of kids will start to actually express a desire wearing what they want to wear. Like, you can't just dress a 12-year-old in whatever you want to dress them in, for the most part. Maybe this occurs even earlier, but I was kind of a late developer in many respects. So yeah, and I also wanted to like wear the cool styles and the haircuts that my male classmates were wearing, because those are my friends, you know. And I pretty quickly learned that was unacceptable behavior from adults in my life. And having grown up in a progressive American city, I had seen men who had undergone the quote-unquote sex changes, and that's the term that people knew at the time. So I thought that sex change was something that a man does to become a woman.
Yeah.
I didn't, and a thought came into my head, right, when I had been told by adults in my life that it was unacceptable for me to want to wear these, like, nice dapper men's clothes and have, like, a super cool short haircut. I basically, came to the conclusion that if it's unacceptable for women to do this, I want to see if maybe I can do what these men are doing and get a sex change. So I went on the internet and I searched very actively to figure out whether or not the concept of sex changes could also apply to women. And I found my answer, and I latched on, I sunk my what was left of my baby teeth right into that. And it provided, a framework for the way that my life was going to go. I mean, I didn't know what it was like to be a lesbian or to grow up. I didn't know what that looked like. I knew that lesbians and gays existed intellectually, and I was like the mini gay rights activist of my middle school before anybody else was talking about it.
But you didn't know that you were a lesbian.
No, of course not.
That's so funny. My sister actually went through a similar thing.
Really?
She was she was very sheltered. I was bisexual. I came out as bisexual when I was 11. Like, I knew that I was attracted to girls, like, as soon as I started feeling sexual attraction. So I came out, and I've always been bisexual. I've always known that I liked girls, and I was always just, like, okay with it, and, like, fine. I came out as bisexual, and my parents were like, oh, you might grow out of it, you might not, and I was like, yeah, I don't care. And then I got a girlfriend, and then I like started kissing girls, and my parents were like, yeah, okay, cool. And then like I told my sister, and she was like, no, you're not bisexual. And I was like, yes, I am. And then I was like, by the way, I've dated girls. And she was like, oh. And I had to come out to her like 3 times. But then by the time I was like out as trans, it took her like 2 years after I came out as trans to like accept me. And then by the time I was like 17 was when she was finally like coming around to it. And my sister and I like became like friends again. Wow. Then she became the biggest trans activist out of anyone in my family. Because of me, because it's my fault. That it's my fault, according to her, that she is a trans rights activist. And she was also like the biggest ally ever after this point. But she was like, I'm the straightest like ally ever, or whatever. Or like, I'm the gayest straight person ever, that's what she would say. But then she came out as bisexual when she was like 25.
You know what I have to say to that?
What?
Bruh.
And she finally slept with a girl for the first time when she was
and she
like
told you about
20s.
that.
Yeah.
Wow, you guys really do talk about things in your family.
What do you mean she told me about that?
It's just kind of remarkable that you talk to your siblings about.
My sister and I are like tight, like besties.
Wow.
The only thing that we like disagree on is like the trans stuff, and also that she has autism, which she definitely doesn't have, but that's fine.
Well, we all have differences in our family, and I think you've handled it with grace and diplomacy and humor, biting humor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So that's really interesting, though, so do you think that in a way that you might have been drawn to trans because, well, we know that there's a certain level of gender nonconformity associated with bisexuals and lesbians and gays. Well, I mean, being with a member of the same sex as you is inherently gender nonconforming. But aside from that, I mean, everybody has known until 5 seconds ago that the likely trajectory of a little boy who likes to wear dresses and nail polish and sparkles and will die on that hill, not just somebody whose sisters dress him up, but like a little boy who actively seeks that out. Until like 5 seconds ago, every person, whether they accepted gay people or whether they were homophobes who wanted to beat it out of their child, knew what the likely trajectory of that child would be, which, I will just say it out loud for the people who can't read between the lines, that kid is likely to be gay.
They'd be gay.
That is a likely homosexual trajectory, and everybody knew that until 5 seconds ago.
5 seconds ago. Yes.
When, or rather until maybe what, like 15 years ago whenever Jazz Jennings happened?
Yeah.
Like that...
Not less than like 10 years ago, 12 years ago.
Oh, well, 2007 I think is when that's about 2006, 2007. The first one, yeah, when he was a little kid, when he was like a little...
I thought that was like 2010s.
No, he's basically, I mean, he's close to our age. He was born in 2000.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I think he was like 6 or 7 during the first special of Barbara Walsall. Anyways, so everybody knew until recently what these types of kids would likely grow up to be, and and the stigma and this, or the stereotype of like tomboy, that didn't necessarily carry with it like the same stigma around it.
No, not at all.
Yeah, like, and most people didn't assume.
Not when we were little.
Yeah, although I will say that there's something that not enough people talk about, which is the fact that like tomboys, or like girls who engage in masculine behavior or have masculine like clothing and hairstyle preferences, are expected to grow out of it during puberty.
That's true.
It's fine until puberty, and that's why I think you see a lot of these tomboys.
Me personally, I was like a feminine, like girly girl when I was like little, and then up until I was like 10, maybe 9-ish. And then I was like a huge tomboy when I was like 10, 11. And then when I started going through puberty, I absolutely became like a huge like tomboy. Like I wore like men's shirts. I didn't want to wear like tight fitting clothes or makeup or anything. Like I didn't want to be feminine at all. And all of my friends who had been tomboys growing up, I like at one point like logged onto Facebook when I was like 14, and I was still like super like a tomboy. Like after puberty hit, I stopped being feminine because I didn't like it anymore. I did like grow my hair out like to this length, but other than that, like I looked pretty much the same as I do now. Like I didn't wear makeup, I didn't like whatever, like girly clothes, or like I didn't care about any of the things that I wasn't like other girls.
Yeah, you weren't like the other girls.
I was not like the other girls.
She was different.
I was different.
You were non-binary.
I was.
And then you were a boy.
I was.
That's how different you were. That's the way that you signaled.
Yes.
That's the way that you signaled.
Well, no, what happened is that, like, I, at one point, like, when I was in this little phase, like, as I was trying to figure myself out, when I was like, I'm non-binary, I'm a boy, whatever, I went onto Facebook one day, I was looking up all the girls that I used to be friends with who were tomboys when we were kids, when we were, like, 11 and 12, before we all hit puberty. I was trying to find other girls who might have been like me, but they were all wearing dresses, they were all wearing makeup, they were all like girly, and I was like, okay, then I'm obviously a boy.
Yeah, that must have, I think, okay, here's what I think was happening, just to be the armchair psychologist.
Yes, please.
Right, leave it to the one who doesn't understand social cues to be the armchair psychologist. Okay.
And leave it the one who has half a psych degree to be the one listening.
Okay, well, I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Me too.
So what I think was going on for you were two things. One is that nobody took you seriously as a bisexual. At least,
That's true. I mean, I was going to mention that.
Yeah,
too.
like your mom was like, you might grow out of it. And that's the last thing a kid wants to, okay, to the parents, if your kid makes some declaration about their sexual identity.
You don't need to say that. You can think it.
Yeah.
You don't need to say it.
Even if they're really young.
Yeah.
Even if they're so young to the point where they clearly have not had a sexual awakening, and I know that it's very difficult for parents to think about their kids in this light, and there's a reason for that, obviously, but, like, if your little kid is making declarations about their gender or sexual orientation, honestly, you can think whatever you want. We're not in some communist utopia where your thoughts are censored.
Policing
right?
thoughts.
Yeah, we're not policing your thoughts, but from the perspective of people who've been through this and are caught up in the same thing that your kid is caught up in right now and who have lived to tell the tale, is really this. You have to, when a kid comes to you with a declaration, what they're trying to tell you is not the literal words they're saying. Kids are very metaphorical creatures. They have imaginations. Yeah. And then that imagination evolves. Like, you don't see most, 10, 11, 12-year-olds playing make-believe. You don't, maybe with the autistic ones, that would make sense that they might do that at a later age, especially the girls. But so most kids, when they tell you something, they're signaling to you, especially with a revelation about a sexual identity, they're basically signaling to you, they're saying, look, Mom, Dad, I'm not the little kid that I used to be. I'm growing up, and I need you to take me seriously. Yes. I need you, this is heavy for me, yes. And I need you to take me seriously. Whether they come out as like gay and you don't think that's the case, or bi, you don't think that's the case, or whether it's trans, and that's obviously non-verifiable identity, in a way that, homosexuality or bisexuality can be verified. And there are studies that have verified the fact that there is such a thing as a sexual orientation. Yeah. If we were to talk about what they did in those studies to verify that, we'd probably get kicked off of YouTube. And this is my first video, so I'm not going to do that. But you can look it up. There are studies which have shown the existence of a sexual orientation. But with trans stuff, with a trans identity, there's not a single piece of evidence to suggest that there is such a thing as a gender identity. A gender identity seems to be basically, fundamentally it's an idea. It's a thought, and it is a rationalization. It's a thought that rationalizes basically many different groups of people who realistically have very little in common with each other. From the, autistic girls and boys who find the internet and they get super involved in this, to the classic, types of kids who are likely to grow up to be gay and haven't realized it, to the people who are suffering with extremely severe mental illnesses of different flavors and shades. And these are the types of people who tend to find solace in the explanation of a gender identity for all kinds of other distress that they're going with in their life, because the theory of gender identity is written in such incredibly broad terms that, similarly to a horoscope, anybody can rationalize.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Anybody can rationalize their experience
good way to put it.
Within that way. Yeah. So gender identity is a horoscope, and maybe as a parents, you guys maybe you guys were into horoscopes when you were in that age. So you need to treat it as if it's that, not as a literal declaration of anything. And plus, affirming an identity as trans is very different than affirming your child's identity as homosexual or bisexual, because if your kid comes out as gay, you're not required to, chop off any body parts, interrupt any reproductive systems. You don't have to do anything. Yeah. I mean, ideally you would just say, okay, cool, that's great, I love you, thanks for telling me, I appreciate it. Or if your kid seems kind of distressed coming to you as gay or bisexual, you just need to reassure them, that you appreciate that they've come to you with something that's been on their heart, and, that you love them. To this one. And that you love them no matter what. Yes. Because, that didn't happen in my case at all. And it pushed me like this close to medicalizing, to such an extent that I went all the way from a safe country into a war zone, into a country that's prone to war, lived through several wars, in order to transition, in order to do that away from my non-affirming parents. And thankfully, I was illegal in Israel for 3 years, and I had no access to healthcare and couldn't medicalize, and I saw your video, and it planted seeds of doubt, and I went down the rabbit hole. But the thing is that if you're trying to get your kid to desist, fundamentally, or the first line of I guess, your first... I like to think of this whole thing as a war strategy, honestly. If your kid, and you're not at war with your kid may think that way, and it may feel that way in your household.
I felt that.
I know. It might feel like that, but that is the wrong strategy. If you are at war with your child, that is the wrong strategy. That's actually going to make your kids sink their heels in really, really far, because kids like to rebel, teenagers especially. It's part of their individuation process. They're trying to grow up and separate. And for a lot of these kids, this is a way to do that. Like, it seemed like for you with your family, this trans identity was a way to gain stability and also to separate from the chaos of your household.
Yeah.
But for other kids, like, especially if you have a kid who says they're gay and then who says they're trans, you're dealing with something a little bit different. You know, you're dealing with a kid who, like, fundamentally, even though you might think that your gay kid is not vulnerable to trans, simply the fact that they're homosexual makes them extremely vulnerable, because all of these gay rights youth organizations are extremely ideologically captured, even in Israel. Even in Israel, I would go to any one of these meetings that had nothing to do with trans, and we were all asked our pronouns. And this is in the Middle East, okay? So, like...
Holy crap.
Yeah. So, like, this ideology has captured gay spaces to the point where if your kid wants to, you know, find a relationship later down the line when they become, like, an older teenager or whatever, if they have a little crush, like, if, you know, the best thing you can do for your kid in that situation to avoid them getting trapped into trans, really, in my mind, is to, one, even if they declare a trans identity, but you think what's going on is actually that they're gay or bisexual, you need to have, like, you need to sit down and think to yourself, like, what is the hill I'm willing to die on? Like, I think that if your kid is demanding a new name, new pronouns, a binder, or some implement for tucking or something of that matter, that you need to say no to unequivocally, because that affirms a false identity. But what you cannot do, I implore you, what you really cannot do is think of name, pronouns, binder, tucking, things of that nature as being at the same level of maladaptive and harmful to your child as just letting them experiment with hair and clothes. And I understand, like, for my parents, I think especially, they saw all of this as the same thing, the same undesirable thing, whether it ended up being me being a butch lesbian or me being trans, because again, this is 2012. So all of this was pretty new, and even in 2012, I would wager that a lot of parents didn't want their kids to be gay.
I think that I went through the same thing, actually.
Yeah?
Like, my mom didn't want me to cut my hair.
Right.
My mom, she freaked out. She wouldn't take me to get a haircut. I had hair this long when I was 14, and I chopped it off myself because my mom
I gave myself a bowl cut.
Me too.
No way.
Yeah, like, I chopped it like this.
Wow.
Like, down to here.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So yeah, parents, I know that for a lot of parents, having a gay child is not the ideal outcome. I get it. There are evolutionary reasons for that. But here's the thing. If you push against your kid and their sexual identity, however they declare it, and, like, whether you think it's real or not, like, a lot of parents will say, oh, there's no way my kid is gay, but they say that because they don't want their kid to be gay. And it doesn't matter why you tell your child, I don't think this is actually what's going on with you. You're dismissing them.
Yeah.
They're not going to like that. They're going to, you know, in my mind, transition was a way of basically, among many other things, forcing the adults in my life to believe me that I was serious.
Yeah.
That I have this sort of masculine essence about me, which is inherent to, or not inherent to, but it is inherent to homosexuality. Maybe not to the extent that I take it, but homosexuals are known to be gender nonconforming, and kids who are on the autism spectrum and or ADHD or whatever, they don't pick up on social cues. They're also much, much more likely to play around with gender roles because they don't pick up on social cues. So my point is that when a kid comes to you and they come to you with a really heavy heart, and they're saying, you know, Mom, Dad, I have something to tell you, I think I'm gay. Even if you really don't want your child to be gay, you have to suck it up. Yeah. There's really no other way to say it. Like, you don't have to agree with it, but you're running a massive danger of pushing your kid further into trans if you make it known that you don't accept the fact that they are gay. Again, we're not thought policing you. We're just saying, as people who, you know, for whom sexual orientation or being sexual minority was, at least, you know, to some extent, or in my case, like an extremely large extent, a massive motivator in what almost caused me to, you know, have my breasts removed and poison myself with copious amounts of testosterone. I'm telling you, like, the best thing you can do for your kid is to really try to read between the lines and be the adult in the situation. If they're trying to drag you into a war about gender, honestly, like, they might be trying to do that, because they want your attention or for a bunch of other reasons. But when it comes to, like, gay, if your kid comes out as gay, just let them be and tell them, thank you for trusting me with this information. Yeah. And you don't need to bring it up. You really, if it makes you uncomfortable, which again, I understand, I'm not telling every single parent here to be a gay rights activist. I'm not even telling every parent to be okay with the fact that their child is gay. I'm telling every parent who has a kid who comes out to them, even if they really don't want them to be gay, just, like, it's not the end of the world if this ends up being true for your kid. I get it, you want grandkids, but if you push against the gay thing really hard, they're going to run to the rainbow. They're going to run right into the rainbow family, and they're going to get into the idea of trans. Yeah. And if you want grandkids, basically arguing your child, that they're with your child, saying that they are not gay, and arguing them, into the all-accepting rainbow glitter family is going to end up with your kid castrated, and you're not going to have grandkids, right? Like, I'm just telling you the hard truth. The best thing you can do for your kid is just let it be. Even if you don't like it, even if you don't like it at all, just let it be. And I promise you that the outcome of your child is going to be significantly better than if you had tried to stop them from being gay. Yeah. Okay.
100% agree.
So now back on a trans.
Yes.
So, I guess the way I want to make this conversation go is also, it's partially to learn about your life, but also with the hopes that maybe a parent comes across this video and sees, like, what tactics your parents did that influenced the trans identity, or maybe or perhaps the tactics that you use to influence your parents, into the trans identity, and what you wish had been done, like what needs you were trying to meet with a trans identity that, that could have been met in other ways. Do you have any ideas around any of those potential topics?
Man, I don't know. Like, it's really hard. I've tried to, like, figure out, like, how to, something that I've talked about and gotten asked about before is, like, what could your parents have done differently? And it's always just like, man, so many things, starting from when I was, like, a baby. I mean, like, they could have parented me completely differently. But it's just, like, at the point when your kid comes out as trans, it's almost like you fucked up. And it's, like, hard to go back from that.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, like, you, as a parent, you already fucked up to the point that your kid came out as trans. It's like, there's nothing that a parent can do at that point to make their kid come out of it.
That's what you think?
I mean, I think the kid has to make the decision at that point.
Really?
I think the best thing to do is, like, parent before they teach them the skills to get through all the uncomfortable physical changes from puberty, teach them how to be communicative, have an open, like, loving relationship where you can share things with each other. Don't treat them like a friend. Treat them like, like they will respect your authority and they will respect your opinions and your life experience as a parent. I don't know. Just, like, I didn't respect my parents at all. I didn't respect my mom because she had no backbone against my dad, and I didn't respect my dad because he was a drunk.
Yeah, I mean, that'll do it.
So I didn't have any reason to listen to them or to think that they knew anything about what they were talking about.
So I think that you are, I mean, my initial thing my initial thought when you were talking about like if you've screwed up already to the point where your kid is identifying as trans, I kind of want to push back against that because my story sort of shows what happens that even though my parents didn't affirm from the very beginning, they didn't affirm, and the reason I ended up in Israel is actually because they realized that this trans fantasy was not going away, and so they basically said, if you want us to help you pay for college, you are going to go to a country where this isn't accepted. And and there are actually a lot of, I don't know if it's a lot, but there are several parents who've actually gotten their kids to desist, and they have like a whole range of tips, from getting their kids outside and into nature and connected with their bodies by like doing sports and making them lift weights and forcing them back into their bodies.
I've seen that.
Like, and there are all kinds, or taking away phones and technology, but replacing it with quality family time. Like, I'm not a parent, I'm not an expert in this, but there are parents who do talk about this.
No, I wasn't saying like they should just give up and like let the kid do whatever they want. I mean like they fucked up and they need to like reevaluate their entire like parenting situation.
I mean,
like that's what those parents had to do. They had to like change whatever wasn't working before and fix it.
I mean, I would say that there are family dynamics that can always be improved. I mean, and actually even if you have perfect family dynamics, it's possible that your kid is trying to find their voice. They're tired of being the good little kid that they used to be, right? They want to be, for a lot of these kids who come from really good, very loving, very nurturing, very involved, homes where there's not even a little skosh of homophobia, for example, kids are always going to find something to rebel against. And I can see actually why a lot of these kids who are like, they were good little kids, and then they hit puberty, and then they have an identity crisis, and they're like, who do I want to become? Because they might be perfectionists and people pleasers, they might not realize like how they can say no to their parents because they've been used to saying yes. So I can imagine that even in the most perfect family relationships, teenagers, whenever they act out, like I actually don't necessarily think that just because a teenager acts out in any way, whether it's drugs or alcohol or trans or anything else, that it means that the parents screwed up. I think in some cases, it definitely can, but in most cases, it means that there might be some kind of, issue within the family. Maybe a sister who's jealous of her brother because she perceives him to be getting better treatment than she gets. Or also, and I mean, I think that what you were saying is especially true for the world 10 years ago when you were, when you got on trans, because back then, it wasn't being pushed from every single corner.
Yeah.
Like, it makes a lot more sense that kids who come from much more troubled backgrounds and much more, like, adverse, many more adverse childhood experiences like the ones that you had, 10 years ago, almost certainly it means that, that there was something really majorly going wrong in the family in order for a kid to come to that type of a conclusion. But nowadays, I'd say that there's a different landscape.
That's true.
Because it's being pushed from every single corner. Like, these kids go to school. They're 5. They're coloring in.
That's your first mistake.
Yeah.
Don't put your kids in public school.
Well, and I mean, the truth is that most parents can't afford to homeschool or put their kids in private school.
No, I know.
But here's the thing. Like, I know that a lot of parents already feel a ton of guilt about their child's trans identification, and I don't want to add to that. I think that, like, what happened in your case is really emblematic of the sort of the 2010s trans kids, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Like, they're kids who are suffering from a great deal of loneliness or hardships at home, or, like, these aren't kids who were just chronically online. Like, they were also kids who were struggling with their sexual orientation, who were struggling with like undiagnosed autism, and they didn't know how to make sense of why they were different from their peers, and they were looking for an explanation. Or we're talking about kids who had, severe mental illnesses and were hospitalized. We're talking like 10 years ago, the cohort seemed to be overwhelmingly troubled, whereas today's cohort, if we're talking about the teenagers, the trans-identified teenagers, it seems like it's much more a result of, like, yeah, you have the kids who have the mental illnesses and the autism and stuff like that who are thrown in there, and some of the kids who are going to grow up to be gay. But what I see a lot more is actually that it's just so trendy in a way that it wasn't even in our peer group. Like, and there was still a certain online subculture in which it was trendy, but now that online subculture has infiltrated, it's mainstream. And part of me wonders, like, will trans ever become so mainstream that kids will stop getting into it?
I think so.
Like, but I think that there's something so alluring to teenagers, especially insecure teenage girls, about becoming anything but yourself and anything but a woman. So I don't think that alone is going to solve any of this. I think there needs to be, we need to somehow extract gender ideology from every single institution within Western society that it has invaded, including education, including, our medical, our healthcare system here in the United States, which is a for-profit healthcare system, which basically benefits from the constant medicalization and the over-medicalization of kids for a variety of reasons, not just gender. Like, our society here in the United States is inherently vulnerable to everything that this ideology wants, everything that it claims, and everything that it wants to reify within reality. Like, whether it's within, like, right off the tails of the gay rights movement, the trans movement used the same exact frameworks legally, and the arguments of the gay rights movement, we just want to be like you. That's how it started. We were born this way, right?
Yep.
And because because the movement for marriage equality had succeeded and catalyzed in the legalization of same-sex marriage federally within the United States, I believe in 2015, the trans tipping point happened, so soon after that, because these organizations needed to keep securing funding. And so they pivoted to trans, and trans is an ideology that is it demands such fundamentally different things from what the gay rights movement demanded. Like, the trans movement is making demands that you have to go along with the concept of a gender identity, that you need to support, anybody of any age, undergoing these dangerous and experimental medical treatments, that you are a bad parent if you don't let your kid harm their body with these experimental and dangerous, interventions. And also that there is such a thing, that woman is an idea in a man's head that he thinks he can become. Like, the trans movement is fundamentally trying to restructure society with, the invasion of sex-based spaces, and basically just, they want to dismantle the idea of biological sex. And when I got into trans in 2012, they actually weren't trying to do that. So I saw this evolve. I saw this whole thing evolve, which is why I went on this whole rant. Because I think that with, the kids these days, and that we're talking about mostly parents of, teenagers who I think are really struggling because their kids might be approaching their 18th birthday and they don't know what to do. I would say that actually, you should not blame yourselves. Blame is a really unhelpful feeling. You shouldn't be blaming either yourself or your child, because that's not going to help you strategize on how do you get your kid out of this. What's going to, if you're going to blame anybody, blame the ideologues who have infiltrated every single Western institution and are pushing this incessantly towards your kids. If you're going to blame anybody, blame them, not yourself, not your child. There might be enough blame to go around, but it is, again, unhelpful to wallow in blame and, feel scared and sorry for yourself or your kid or the situation. Because here's the thing, when my parents, when there was a lot of emotional volatility around this trans conversation, and my parents showed their sadness and their crying. To me, it felt highly manipulative. It felt like they were, especially in a family that didn't talk about emotions growing up. It felt like it felt highly manipulative. So here's the thing: you're the adult, and your kid is the kid. At least around your kid, I do think you need to maintain a certain level of calmness, strength, and maturity. And if you need to, see a counselor or, have wine with your friends every now and again and blow off steam, or even just go into your room and cry, then that's what you need to do. But in front of your kid, you and your partner, you are a united front. You have to talk about the strategy with your partner. You can't have one parent undermining the other. That's not going to work. And I guess So don't blame yourself. Don't blame your kid. And having lived through several wars in the Middle East, I'm telling you that what you're doing right now when you're trying to get your kid out of trans is fighting a war. You are fighting a war. You are fighting a war against ideologues and basically every single institution within Western society that is stacked against you. In a war, you need unity, you need an informed strategy, and there are really great podcasts like, Just Some Therapist, I think is what it's called, Stephanie Wynn's podcast. Also, Gender a Wider Lens, shout out. And also, there are all kinds of, parents who've, like Erin Friday, for example, who have helped their kids desist, or like Gabrielle Clark, who have a social media presence, and they will give you tips as to how to, the more specific interactions they've observed, having worked with these populations and their parents about how to get your kid to desist. So I'm not going to paraphrase everything they've said. Go to them. Use what they're saying as a way to inform your strategy, as a way to basically figure out, okay, which of these character profiles sounds like my kid, and what are the possible family dynamics that are going on here? Maybe something is out of whack, or maybe things are just too perfect and your kid has never had to fall really hard and pick themselves up and realize that they can build resilience. So anyways, I think that kids these days are up against something very different, but honestly, our parents, right? Your parents took a very different strategy than my parents took. Your parents wanted to be your friend. I mean, at least one of them, and the other one was too incapacitated to be able to provide that type of guidance to you. In my family, my parents were unilaterally against it to such an extent that they told me to, move to the Middle East, thinking that this would snap me out of trans, not realizing that moving to the Middle East, where sex roles are so segregated and so specific and so prescriptive, that somebody like me, a lesbian, they don't know what to do with me. They don't really know what lesbians are in some parts of Israel, and definitely in the West Bank. I mean, so for me, it was really easy to pass as a man, and that furthered my social transition, and the social transition in and of itself primed me to want medicalization more than I would have had I just become okay with being a masculine lesbian. And I'll tell you exactly why. It's because the older you get and the more you build, you intertwine your life, and your identity upon a false sense of self, a false premise, the more incongruity you feel, because you're trying to project the image of being of the opposite sex, but you actually aren't. So anyways, I knew at some point that nobody was going to take me seriously as a guy in his early 20s, and that's what really accelerated my drive to medicalize. And it was really only just a chance of luck that didn't happen. So I want to hear, what do you think about everything I just said?
Well, I was going to say, you said, my parents, you forgot that I mentioned that my mom at first didn't want me to transition, but
okay.
I wore her down for a year.
So let's go into that, because I think some parents might be facing a similar situation, even with this cohort, the cohort of today.
Yeah. Well, I can't even remember at this point if I mentioned at the beginning that that when I first came out as trans, I don't even know if I got to that point in the story of when I actually came out as trans and she was like, no.
Yeah, we didn't. That was way earlier. Let's go into that now.
Okay, so when I came out as trans, as a boy, when I finally decided that was actually what I wanted to do, I don't remember how. I remember getting excited, and then I remember that I'm pretty sure I went and told my mom right away, because I was so excited that I wanted to share that excitement with my family.
Wow, so you were excited. For me, it was very dark and depressing and scary.
No,
and
I was so excited. I was like, Mom, this is it. This is the problem. This is what's wrong with me.
So had you been pathologized by anybody before you came? You were saying this is what the problem is. Was there an alternate theory before trans as to what the problem is? Like, you don't have to
Yeah.
specify, but you can if you want to.
Depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. I have mental illness. I've been to the mental hospital 3 times. I've had an eating disorder. I've been put on antipsychotics, stimulants, benzodiazepines, SSRIs. Literally just medicalized since I hit puberty, because I went through all of that in like a 2-year time span.
Wow.
Before coming out, 2 or 3 year time span before coming out as trans.
Right, and the eating disorder is also, earlier I was
self-harm.
Right, those are all ways of, again, getting control over your body.
Yeah.
In a way, because your home life was so unstable that the trans identity and the eating disorder and the self-harm all seem to be coming from literally the exact same cause and the same need. So I think what we're deducing here is that you had a need for stability that was being so unmet that you basically went to all kinds of, unimaginably like crazy but also heartbreaking lengths to gain control. So that's right. And so when you were able to convince your mom to accept the trans identity, did you feel the same sense of excitement, and did you feel like you finally had the control in the situation, in the relationship?
Yeah, I think it was like that. It was like I spent basically like a year like crying to my mom like almost every day, just like I would obsess over this, like wanting to transition, looking up all of the effects of like the hormones, looking up what the surgeries could do, trying to figure out, like, it started with me just literally reading like, I'm a trans boy, like this is what trans boy means. It means I was a boy born in a girl's body, and that's all I knew. And then from there, me coming out to her and her being like, no, you are not doing anything until you're 25. You are not having any surgeries or any hormones until you are a legal adult and you are like moved out of here, and then I will help you. It was an immediate no. It was an immediate pushback. It was an immediate like. It did not feel like love. It did not feel like it came from a place of love, and that's part of the problem too, because like. I felt immediately rejected. I felt immediately like I was being pushed away, like I was being dismissed. So it was, again, another feeling of like, I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to show you that I know what I'm talking about, and that I know myself, and that this is not just a phase, and that this is real, and this is actually going to fix me, and all of this. So yeah, so I did all the research, and I was doing all of this research because I wanted to prove it to my mom that I knew what I was talking about, who I was, and that I, even knowing all the stuff that it would do, that I wanted it still. So I like got really into it and just hyper fixated on it, and by the time I got to the point of like having the appointments to like get on the hormones, like I had a therapist at this point who, as soon as I walked into her office and told her the story that I was a boy born in a girl's body, she was like, I can tell just from the way that your eyes light up as you talk about being a boy that you really are a boy. And she's the one who got me the appointment with Planned Parenthood.
Whoa.
And so, yeah, she was the head of the LGBT center. And she was like a 60-something-year-old lesbian.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
God, that's painful.
I know. It's really sad.
God, can we just talk about the woke lesbians for a second? Because I feel like you had...
It's a problem.
It's like... I don't know how many like older gays and lesbians. I think most of them have their bullshit monitor on when it comes to this stuff. But I also think that a lot of older lesbians, at least like, okay, I met, some lesbians who basically kind of adopted me, and this girl I was dating at the time, women I'd met at a synagogue, and they were much older. I mean, they were retired.
When was this?
Oh, 2018, 17, 18, around that time. And the lesbians like totally affirmed my trans identity, and in fact they'd even had a younger family member, like a niece, that they were helping recover from the phalloplasty surgery.
Oh no!
That they were telling me about. And I was seeking, I was so excited to, even though I was trans identified, the dream that I had since I was like 12 was to meet an actual lesbian couple that was older. Like, I always had that dream. And because at some point, like, being trans identified for so long, I really wanted to settle for just being a lesbian. Like, I saw that as settling. I wanted to be able to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Because I knew that me undergoing all these medical treatments would tear my family apart, and I didn't want to do that. I knew that, being a lesbian obviously wasn't ideal within that context either, but like, at some point I really wanted to not want to transition, and I had this longing to actually meet lesbians to find a way out, but they just affirmed the identity, and I kind
That's
of...
horrible.
Well, I want to be sort of sympathetic, and I want to try to understand, like, because I think it's much more interesting to try to figure out, like, why do people believe what they believe. And I don't know, like, I wonder if it's maybe because they assume that young lesbians these days have the same type of communal infrastructure that they had growing up or that they had coming of age, which we know is not true, but we know that because we're young and we're trying to date. And the lesbian bars, they don't exist anymore. Our dating apps are just filled with men and filled with straight couples and straight couples who want a threesome. And so we don't have the same type of lesbian communal infrastructure that these women who are older...
Lesbians don't really exist anymore either. It's very hard to find lesbians who aren't a gender.
What, like actual female lesbians, like the real kind.
Yeah, and like who aren't like non-binary,
right,
or whatever.
Right, and that's precisely because, like, the gay rights movement, it did give gays and lesbians the right to marry, but it seems like society, at least like Hollywood and the more liberal element of society, has accepted, even to the point of almost like a non-sexual fetishization of feminine gay men. Like, that you have the queer eye for the straight guy, or now it's probably just called queer eye.
Yeah, it's called queer eye.
And, like, feminine men, in a way, within at least, like, popular media representation, are much more accepted than, for example, butch lesbians. I can't tell you when I saw anything recent where there was a butch lesbian, covered in film or on TV. And if I'm missing something, I know I kind of live under a rock with pop culture, but... feel free to drop it in the comments. But I think that the closest thing that young girls like me had to envision what it would be like for us to grow up, what that would look like, were trans men, were women who transitioned. That I came across that before I came across, a happy couple where there was where one of the partners was very masculine. All the lesbians I'd come across were either as we have to say on the internet, cornified, or
wait, what does that mean?
Adult films.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So either these women were stylized in this type of manner, this highly sexualized manner that appeals to straight men and doesn't appeal to actual lesbians, or they were just in general both partners being pretty feminine. I didn't, when I'd see shows like The Fosters growing up.
I don't even recall any butch lesbians being in lesbian couples that I've seen on TV shows.
I know, it's on The Fosters, right?
Feminine.
Yeah, where both partners are feminine, and that's because right, because butch women, I guess, are considered to be unattractive, because we have our own thing going on. I mean, we're attractive to the people we date, to the women who love us and who date us.
I for one, love butch lesbians. Just saying.
This is your testimony.
Bisexual.
This is your testimony.
I have to say it. I can't hold it in anymore. We love butch women. Butch lesbians. We meaning me.
Meaning you. See, and I would have needed to hear that.
I love butch women. Butch women are so hot, dude. Butch lesbians are hot as fuck, including detrans women, including trans guys. Sorry, trans guys, lesbians. Sorry, you're included in my butch lesbian category, and you're hot. Sorry, not sorry.
And I would have really needed to hear something like that being said, or just seeing a loving couple where there was a butch lesbian in there, because, yeah, I just didn't have any idea of what I would grow up to become, and I was so desperately searching for that. So I think you just healed my inner child.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. You did that right out, after you poured water on my head. So, I guess we're even.
I planted the seed, and I healed,
and then you watered it,
and then I healed your inner child. I've really done a lot for you tonight.
You really have, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's not much more that I can contribute. So.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's true. I think you're actually a wealth of knowledge and experience and understanding. And honestly, I think that maybe, these young girls who are dealing with same-sex attraction and they're really kind of struggling with it, they really do need to know that their dating pool, if they just embrace what they actually are, their dating pool is going to be significantly broader than if they, if they're a lesbian that, pretends to not be a lesbian and tries to go for straight girls and then fails and then gets really, sad and upset about it. I think that kids, fundamentally, they need to embrace what they are. And I'm not saying that they need to make it their entire personality, which it makes sense when teenagers, make their, especially if they're gay, make that their entire personality. That's a developmental stage.
Yes.
Right? Chances are that if you don't give them attention over it, they'll just grow out of it. That's a developmental stage, so I wouldn't push back there too much either. But if I had just heard that, there was a place for somebody like me to just grow up and be and not try to, and not have to harm myself so much, not have to, squash my breasts, constantly, including sleeping in the damn thing, because everybody knew me as a man. And so if I was in a Bedouin village, and Bedouins are nomadic Arabs, if I were in a Bedouin village and, I was sleeping there overnight doing some kind of peace event with Jewish and Arab children, which has happened a few times, I would sleep in the thing because,
God, that's horrible.
I know,
dude.
and everybody says...
I could barely even sleep on my sides, without the binder on after wearing it all day. My ribs would literally, be pushed in if I, laid on my side in bed after wearing my binder all day.
Wow.
I would literally... My ribs were literally deformed, so soft that they would get, pushed in just from the pressure of me laying on them.
Oh my
That ever
God.
happened to you?
I don't know. I just... Binding for that many years and...
How many years?
7.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and I mean, even before then, I tried, the internet says don't use ace bandages, don't use tape, don't use... Everything that they told me...
Do.
Yeah, everything they told me not to do, I did, because my parents didn't affirm and wouldn't buy me a binder.
Yeah.
And at the same time, nobody was telling me that it was just okay to be gay. And, I've heard from a lot of people that what allows gender dysphoric lesbians, which, by the way, that's a thing. There are so many...
It's such a thing.
It's always been a thing, which is why butches have been transitioning in droves, medically, for at least the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And they've been transitioning socially since way before the advent of these medical technologies as applied to women. Mm-hmm. So, there has always been a desire for the more masculine female partner in a lesbian relationship to want to live as a man, because the truth is that it's really hard to be a gender nonconforming woman whose gender nonconformity extends beyond just being a tomboy. When people say oh, it's okay to be a tomboy, why would you want to be a boy? I'm look at me, do I look like a tomboy to you? This is something, this whole category of like, much more extreme gender nonconformity, and we're talking about very masculine women and very feminine men. We're talking about people, who experience much more social alienation because they sort of refuse to, I guess, give up on this essence of themselves, which is very nonconforming.
Yes.
They refuse to conform because it is uncomfortable for them. And the truth is that, like, it's hard to be a butch woman. And basically, I mean, it's really surprising when I meet a butch woman who claims to have, like, never, ever wanted to transition. That honestly, it surprises me when this thought doesn't cross somebody's mind. Like, those people are remarkable. They're the exception.
I agree, honestly. That's, like, strong sense of self.
I know.
Like, I don't know how.
They're remarkable and they're incredible, but I would say that they're the exception.
We should study them.
We should study them, yeah.
we should interview them.
God, I know.
I'm actually so
like a butch who has never
curious.
Who has never contemplated the idea of transition.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Isn't
would be
fascinating.
That would be totally fascinating. Should we do that? Maybe let us know in the comments. I don't know.
Somebody who fits that description, please let us know.
Yeah, let us know, because it ain't either of us,
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, I don't remember where we were going.
We're just going.
We're just going.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, just let your kids be, let them play around with clothes and hair, and know that, like, I think a big misconception with parents these days is that they think, like, oh, I'm not a homophobic parent, and, like, society's much more accepting of gay people than it was when I was a kid. Therefore, if my kid says they're trans, it couldn't be because they're gay, because we've given them every indication that we'll love them no matter what.
That's
right?
so true.
And
that's so true, dude.
This is not the type of family that I grew up in. But I will say that I think that even if my family were super accepting of the fact that I was gay, I would still have wanted to go trans simply because I had never seen a role model of what I could become. All the lesbians is like both partners super feminine. There was no real representation of how actual lesbian relationships look. And fundamentally...
It's crazy because, like, gayness is, like, less accepted now.
Yeah, the trans movement has really...
It's better to be trans now.
I know. It is, and if you're a masculine gay woman, and you don't identify as trans, then you'll be bombarded by people telling you that maybe you're trans. Have you considered that maybe you're trans? Maybe you're non-binary? What are your pronouns? Like, people will always ask me my pronouns, even, ever since desisting, even since I stopped binding.
Yes.
It's very clear that I'm female because I have breasts. Like, people will still ask me my pronouns. And I'm now at the point where I'm not trying to pass as a man anymore. I'm wearing, cool dapper clothes, some nice paisley, a nice, wool vest from Ireland. I have this hair, right, that I try to style in a certain way. Huh?
I said meticulous.
Maybe somewhat meticulous. I don't know. But, like, the point is that I'm not trying to pass for a man, but because I like to wear, the more stylish end of the men's section, because I think it's just, I like the style of it.
Great.
I appreciate that. Thank you. This is the way I like to look and the way I like to dress, and this is the only way, frankly, that I'm comfortable in my female body. The more, like, what I've realized since desisting is that, and like, having seen a lot of detransitioners who basically go from being trans to being a gender-conforming member of their sex, like, that is what made me think I don't want to detransition. Because I thought, again, we're talking about kids and young people who have black and white thinking, and they don't really understand, like, especially in my case, because I have a lot of autistic traits, and one of them, definitely, especially when I was younger, was black and white thinking, and I saw detransitioners go from trans to gender-conforming members of their sex and thinking, well, that's not me, and it honestly scared me to think about going back to living as a woman, because I thought that going back to living as a woman would mean that I had to look like Elle, for example, which is not, I don't mean that in a negative way,
I know exactly.
because, obviously you're gorgeous and stunning and just, yeah. I mean, look at her, guys. I mean, she's just something else. She could be a supermodel. But, but that's not my, like, that's not what I wanted to be. Like, I liked the clothes I was wearing.
Yeah.
And when I realized that being a woman is not being a feminine adult human female, but rather just being an adult human female, it made it easier to sort of disentangle myself from this web of lies, because I realized that actually I can do the exact same things as I'm doing now. I can wear the same clothes, have the same haircuts. I don't have to squash my breasts anymore. And I don't have to try to, pretend to everybody around me that I'm a man and be really, nervous if somebody can't tell what I am and maybe refers to me as a woman and maybe not. Like, I don't have to live under this constant bubble of anxiety and this dark cloud of sort of dread of everything that's people are thinking about me. And I can actually just be. And I've actually realized that, something that's important with desistance and detransition, whatever you want to call it, I think, and maybe you can speak to this as well, is the aesthetic, playing with aesthetics. It seems to be like people get into trans, a lot of people get into trans specifically for the aesthetic, right? Like for some people,
I know what you mean.
Right, like the colored hair and the piercings and the tattoos and just all the, the whole combo with the black baggy hoodie.
Yes, I wanted I wanted people to know that I was like a trans guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I started passing as an actual guy, that's when I started freaking out and like wearing women's clothes again.
Wow.
Because I wanted to be like gender non-conforming in a way.
That's interesting with the, this might be like more of this sort of bisexual female subtype of gender dysphoria and the way that it presents, because you were drawn to gender nonconformity in whatever role you were in.
Yeah.
Like, as a girl, especially when you hit puberty and presumably started to, experience a sexual awakening, do you think that is sort of what started to make you not want to be super girly anymore? Do you think that had anything to do with it? Or do you think, what do you think it was?
I think that a big part of it was being sexualized by men.
Mm-hmm.
Being sexualized by like pedophiles, like on the internet, because I was on the internet in places that I shouldn't have been in, and watching porn as well. So that definitely I think had an impact on me, like not wanting to be feminine. And because from a young age, because I was like, I don't want to like be like targeted, or like I don't want to be like looked at in the way that these like women are looked at.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to like stop that from happening, I think. But I also was just so uncomfortable with my body, like in general, and like the eating disorder.
Mm-hmm.
I hated like my body, so I didn't like to like look at my body, so I didn't want to wear like tight clothes or like anything like that. So I just like was so just like, I want to wear the baggiest of clothes, and I want to wear like, and I just like cut all my hair. I had a short haircut. I didn't like makeup. I had no desire to do makeup. Like, I didn't want to be like my older sister or my mom either. They were both super feminine. And I don't know. I think some of it was just like my personality, but I think a lot of it was also just like all the trauma that I was going through, where I was just like dissociating. Like I didn't want to be in my body at all.
Right. So that just seems like, that seems like that sort of teenage adolescent female experience.
Yeah.
And in a nutshell.
Yeah.
But what I'm wondering about is, and maybe it didn't play a role for you, but do you think that, like, what I'm interested in exploring is, do you think that your attraction to girls when it started, do you think that impacted the way that you wanted to dress? Because we know that female sexuality is largely based on dynamics. Females seem to care more about the dynamic with their partner than about, specific body parts that their partner has, in which proportions do they exist. Like, that's sort of the difference between male and female, typical sexuality is that men tend to be much more sort of target-driven or object-driven, and women seem to be much more driven to sort of the dynamic of the relationship or some kind of emotional understanding. Um, would you say that, like, I mean,
I'm curious about where you've gotten that information from.
oh, I mean, all kinds of like evolutionary biologists and
Okay.
sexologists
I
have
feel like I'm curious. I'm just curious to hear more
attested
about
to
that
that.
at some point.
Yeah, like
But
you would want to probably go on their channels to hear
Yeah.
that. But the reason I bring it up is like I'm curious about, like, from the perspective of somebody who is bisexual, and like, because it was confusing enough to be gay growing up. Being gay, that was just confusing as hell. Did you feel like when you started to, like, you said you had your first girlfriend around, what, 13 or something?
13, yeah.
So did you feel like the way that you wanted to present yourself changed when you got in a relationship with another girl?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. So I was telling Maya earlier that I've had crushes on like boys since I was like 5 years old, and I had a crush on a boy every single year that I was in elementary school. But I didn't have a crush on girls until I hit puberty and started developing sexuality, but I knew that I was bisexual from like age 11, because I think I had a crush on my best friend in elementary school at one point. But I couldn't discern if it was a crush or just like a really, really, really good friendship. Looking back, I'm not 100% sure. I had a few like really, really close like girl friends who I might have had a crush on, but I didn't develop sexuality until my first girlfriend, and she was the first girl that I think I probably ever like was sexually attracted to. And when we started dating, I had a little bit of internalized homophobia, because
Explain to the audience, like, what that looks like.
yeah,
or how that feels viscerally, like in your body or in your mind. Like, what did you?
So for me, I had already been out as bisexual for like a year or two, but I lived in Montana, and Montana, especially back then, before even like being gay was like widely accepted at all, like 2013, people were still using like gay as like insults, and like calling people who looked like me back then with like short hair, really skinny, really boyish, like gay, and lesbians as an insult.
Mm-hmm.
So I was told like, you look like a lesbian as an insult.
Whoa.
before I even like came out.
Wow.
As to like the public. I was already out to myself, but like to like people.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was a thing, cuz I was a super like stoner aesthetic kid. Like PNW stoner aesthetic. Like I wore beanies, I wore like baggy like sweatshirts, zip up sweatshirts, and I had like the Justin Bieber like flippy like haircut. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know the type. I know the type.
That was me.
That was emblematic of the time.
It was.
God, you really like.
I was cutting edge.
You went full force.
Neff beanies, you know.
Oh my God, those were the days.
Yeah.
That was such a trend. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I was the skinny jeans, the colorful skinny jeans kid too.
Wow. You just embraced early 2010s fashion.
Yeah.
Like, you just
Skater fashion. Yeah. Skater stoner, but I was not a skater or a stoner back then. But I was later. Anyways.
That's important for the audience to know.
I know.
Allegedly.
Yeah. So, anyways. So yeah, but I had that aesthetic like on lock by the time I started dating my girlfriend. But I remember, I have like distinct memories of, I didn't want anyone to know that we were dating. So I was very like, even when we go out in public, I didn't want to hold her hand. I didn't want to be out. And even though I had come out to my family and to like my friends at that point, like, I didn't want to go around holding hands with a girl, because I lived in Montana and like I didn't know what was going to happen. Like, even being young like gay girls could have been dangerous for us. And so like I didn't I had a fear. I was scared. I was scared of anyone knowing. And she wanted to introduce me to her family at one point. I think we were at the fair, and we had been dating for like a month or two maybe. She wanted to hold my hand, and I like pulled it back, and we just kind of walked around like we were friends. And then she brought me over to her family, and I think there was something that happened where she like wanted to call me her girlfriend, or like she did call me her girlfriend, and I was just like, I didn't want her to. And I don't remember if she did and we like fought over it, or if she was like upset that she couldn't. Something happened with that. But I do remember that after that, after that day, I remember I had a thought where I was like, actually, I don't give a shit. And I decided that I didn't care. Because I was like, you know, I'm sure that nothing is probably going to happen because we have the benefit of the doubt of being young girls, we could just be best friends holding hands because that's what girls do. So I was like, okay, I've decided that I'm going to be okay with this from now on. And that, unfortunately, I think had already kind of damaged our relationship. So I don't think we lasted very much longer after this. Our relationship was kind of short-lived anyways. It was only like a summer thing.
You were 13, so that's actually pretty impressive for a bunch of couple 13-year-olds. Like a whole summer.
It was a cute relationship though. She was my first kiss, and it was like the most amazing first kiss ever.
Wow.
I still look back and like smile about it because it was so cute and really good. But yeah, it's really sad though to look back on that, because I didn't feel 100% comfortable or like myself, even though I was being myself. Like I was like, I can't show this part of myself to other people. But
my God, that's relatable.
Yeah, but then after that day, like after she talked about it to me, and she was like, what's the big deal? Like, what's the worst thing that could happen? Like, what are you so afraid of? I remember her saying that to me, and I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. So then I was like, yeah, I don't really have anything to be afraid of, because like I remember I went to my parents after that and like told them that I was dating her, and my mom was like, I know, because she had figured it out at that point.
Whoa.
Because we would like make out at my parents' house for hours
in
my room.
I have so many questions.
So yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Check out Maia. Maia's really cool. Obviously, if you've watched this far, you probably agree.
And if you haven't, it's probably because you have a certain sense of maybe priorities.
Maybe you fell asleep.
Yeah.
Maybe you're just putting this on in the background and you like forgot that you just turned the volume down because you got so annoyed by the way that we sounded. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel
Some people do that.
Some people do that. I fall asleep to podcasts.
Exactly. So, yeah. But anyways, thanks for the views.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. All right, so I'm on Twitter at thepeacepoet99, and my channel name will probably be in the description. And if it isn't, then
Maia,
whatever.
Maia Poet.
Yeah, at Maia Poet.
Maia Poet.
Yeah, there we go.
And she is a poet.
No shit.
Am I a poet? Maia Poet.
Wow. That was probably the most coherent thing that either of us have said all night, if we're being honest.
Okay, this video is over now.
Peace.
Bye.
Peace in the Middle East and stuff. Bye.
Thanks for watching.